In today's video, we are going to understand the relationship between Romanticism and literature. What exactly was the impact of Romanticism on literature? So, Romanticism peaked during the late 18th and somewhere towards the middle of the 19th century, and it sort of reshaped several literary forms, themes, and techniques. So, today we are going to understand how Romanticism had its impact on literature. The first point that we see over here is the emphasis on emotion and imagination. Now, within this topic, we have a subtopic called subjective experience. Now, romantic literature, when we talk about romantic literature, it places a very profound emphasis on personal emotions and the individual experiences, right? So, the subjectivity is at the center point where romantic writers focused mainly on the inner life of characters, where they explored their feelings, dreams, emotions, and other struggles in depth. Next, we have is imaginative expression. So, the romantic period also focused, or rather, it valued imagination as a very powerful creative force, where imagination had that ability to inspire, right? Where these writers often employed vivid imagination, and even language. When it come to talk about language, the was quite creative and imaginative, and they explored fantastical and supernatural themes. Now, these elements are in direct contrast to what we have already seen with the rationality and the intense focus on reason during the neoclassical literature or neoclassical period. Next, we have celebration of nature. Now, nature in this context becomes very important, as it is at the central theme of any romantic literature. Nature is depicted not only as something which is beautiful, but it is also a source of spiritual and emotional renewal, as we will come to see in the later part of this series. When you talk about romantic writers, will come across William Wordsworth, how he talks about the healing power of nature. Nature is also personified, right? And it is described in a way that reflects the inner experience of a character. So, nature and anything that is connected with nature, like mountains, rivers, lakes, trees, all these natural elements are the central aspect of romantic literature. Now, next we have symbolism. Now, these natural elements are frequently used symbolically, right? It is not conveyed explicitly, rather some sort of symbolism is used to represent the emotional states, or any sort of philosophical ideas and personal growth. Like, for instance, supposedly there is a stormy landscape, right? It's cloudy, it's thundering, right? It's about to rain. So it might symbolize the turmoil of a character, the inner part, the inner psyche of a character. Whereas, if there is a serene lake, it's bright outside, sunny, and everything is quiet and calm, it represents the peace and calmness of a character. So these natural elements also function as a symbolism. Okay. Now next point we have is focus on the individual and the heroic. Now we also have a romantic hero, right? Not in poetry, but perhaps in some prose, you'll find that there is a romantic hero, and is often characterized by individualism, and that person, he or she, may be of a rebellious spirit, and we find then that they are a bit alienated from the society. All right, so this figure is typically of a very complex, introspective character who directly challenges the societal norms, and they seek personal authenticity. Right, the individuality is the most important aspect of a romantic hero. Now next is exploration of identity. Now this romantic literature, it sort of delves into the theme of self-discovery. Okay, self-discovery is very important, as we have already discussed about the individuality of the character. So self-discovery also becomes important, and they try to find themselves, their own existence, right? And quite often we find characters who struggle with their place in the world, and they would further seek deeper meaning about who they are, what exactly is their purpose in their life. So these kind of personal reflection is often reflected in the romantic literature. Coming on next is interest in the supernatural. Right, earlier we have discussed about the natural elements, but now there is an immense focus in the supernatural and also the gothic. Right, so the supernatural elements, let's talk about supernatural elements. In the works of many romantic writers, we often find that they have incorporated supernatural elements, like magical creatures, ghosts, and some spiritual or otherworldly phenomena, which is not common in our world. Now this obsession or fascination with the supernatural, it adds certain kind of mystery. It adds mystery and intrigue to the narrative. Now that curiosity sort of renders that supernatural element, right? Now in the gothic fiction, we find that there is a emergence, a subgenre of romantic literature, the gothic novel, which also became popular during this period, right? Where we often find that it featured dark and eerie setting. Perhaps oftentimes we talk about the psychological horror of the themes of madness and decay. Very important work that we see under gothic fiction is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Now, Mary Shelley wrote about Frankenstein, and another glaring example would be Bram Stoker's Dracula. We all have heard about Dracula. It's very famous fiction. We'll discuss about Frankenstein and Dracula perhaps in the later parts in this series. Next is exploration of social and political themes. All right. So it is not only related just to nature, but it is also, it has interest in the social themes as well as the political theme. Now we have the revolutionary ideals. So romantic literature often reflects the revolutionary ideals of that time, right? Which would include the themes of freedom, individual. Since we are talking about individuality, so we also have to talk about freedom, equality. Equality, we'll find that there were other works during this period which sort of focused on equality and liberty of individuals who were bound earlier in certain chains. And social justice. Now, social justice is quite important, and we'll see that there are many pros that were coming up during this period, which talked about freedom, equality, and social justice. So, these romantic writers were also influenced by the political upheavals of this era, and they sort of incorporated these themes into their works, which is to be found later in the works of many romantic poets. Now we also have the critique of industrialization. Now, industrialization, as we know, was at its peak in the during the later part of the 18th century, right, very end. Now these romantic writers often critiqued the effects of industrialization on society and the environment. So it was not only just about nature, rather it was also about the elements which are causing harm to the environment. Their works often highlighted these contrasts, right, between the natural world and the encroaching industrial landscape. How these modern infrastructure and development programs were hurting the natural world. Okay, the last point for this video today is the influence of major romantic writers. First of all, we'll have some very important prominent name: William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Now, we have already discussed that Wordsworth, along with Coleridge, they both published the magnum opus, the lyrical ballad. But individually, they also had their own composition, where Wordsworth poetry includes work like lines composed a few miles above Tinton Abbey, which is again one of the most important poem that we will come across in the romantic literature. And next one we have Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Coleridge also composed important works like The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Kubla Khan, where he explored the imaginative and the supernatural themes, right? Which also sort of was a method of showcasing his innovative use of language and narrative form, since he delved into that kind of psychological domain. So even the language has to be imaginative and creative in that way. Mary Shelley, Shelley's Frankenstein is a creative fusion of romantic as well as the gothic elements, where she has explored the themes of creation, responsibility, and the consequences of scientific experimentation. How one's curiosity can reach to what heights. The last poet for this video is John Keats. Now, Keats also has beautiful compositions such as Ode to a Nightingale and Ode to a Grecian Urn, where he subtly talks about the themes of beauty, mortality, and most importantly, the transcendent power of art. So that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you.